back to Sparks and Recreation. In today's video, we're going to go over two kind of unique cars here. Today, we're going to go over a couple quick things. What's the real difference between an SRT-4 Neon and a PT Cruiser GT with a 5-speed? Do they sound the same? They have the same motor. They have very similar transmission. Do they drive the same? Is this a budget SRT-4? Start off by looking at the engines in these. They're both a 2.4 turbo, very similar, both based on basically the Dodge Stratus engine, to be honest. Anyhow, if you notice, the intake on this is slightly different. There's no room in the front of these cars, so this intake is a two-piece that comes up and comes in through here, whereas SRT-4, your plumbing is down through here. This has a huge front mount on it, so it's slightly different than how it normally is. This one's bone stock. Anyways, now we see what the engine bays look like, even though this is the same power plant. So if this was to blow up, you could take this and put it into that into this, and vice versa. Let's see what they sound like from behind. So they've heard what they sound like from behind. Let's go over the actual bodies of these. PT Cruiser is quite a bit shorter. This one is a two-door convertible. I've read online in some places that these are lighter, and on other forums they say that they're heavier. So anyways, here's the deal. For the weight, the title for this shows it being 100 pounds heavier. The problem is that titles are not always 100% accurate. If you ever scrapped a car, you'll know that sometimes that's just a generic, what the base model was, that's what they say it weighs. It's not always 100% accurate. Go to scrap the car and it can weigh 100 pounds more, 100 pounds less, all depending on what's going on with it and how much rust is falling off the thing. Driving the two, this one has a couple of modifications, but overall, internally stock. This has blow-off valve, intake, exhaust. This is 100% stock. The SRT-4 feels a lot lighter when you're driving it. I like the manners of this a lot more. Either way, let's look inside, and then we'll take them and do a 40 roll with each of them, and you'll see how fast one is compared to the other. I will say the PT Cruiser has a much nicer interior, even though it's kind of beat up at this point. The leather is really nice. Interesting about these is the 5-speed that's ordered in the PT Cruiser has different gear ratios and reverses to the left, kind of like a German vehicle. And this is a G-Track. Go inside the Neon, which I like the seating position of this more, even though that has a nicer interior. You'll notice more of your standard US shift pattern. What I found online is these are known for destroying third gear. These are not. So I would say that between the two, this one actually has the better tranny, even though I don't think the gear ratio is as good for the power band that these cars produce. This one does have a convertible top that works. It's just freezing cold out, and I'm trying to come up with content since we don't have a go and make it and break it video coming out for another couple weeks. Anyhow, let's drive them. Alright, so let's say you've gone on Marketplace, you found one of these cheap, and you're like, I'm going to do SRT-4 things for a quarter of the price. You have to realize the steering wheel, even though it's got good grip and it's a nice leather steering wheel, this wheel, everything in here does not feel nearly as sporty. You got to remember, both of these cars drive like cheap economy, early 2000s vehicles, so they're a little clunky. Neither is any kind of real luxury. This, you have traction control, so you gotta shut that off because it sometimes tries to spin. If you know anything about this platform, you know that they're both terrible for torque steer. Both will break the tires loose in second gear. I'm gonna get on it as hard as I can, and we'll see. Alright, we're in second, 3,000 RPM. Sounds pretty good. Pulls pretty hard. You would not notice a PT Cruiser. Unfortunately, the reality of this car is that it's a very undesirable body style, even though it has a great drivetrain. If you can find one of these, I would highly recommend at least try driving one. Because for the money, I don't know if you can go much faster for the time period. You can find these for between $2,000 and $4,000. And this is like a rust-free example. If you get a rusty one, you get it for like $1,000. But anyways, the same thing with an SRT-4 Neon. A rust-free SRT-4 Neon at this point is going for over $10,000. The question is, for a small amount of investment, can you do an intake exhaust and tune this to get the same performance as an SRT-4 Neon for less money than it would take to just buy an SRT-4 Neon? And is the performance that much different? Let's jump over to that. Also, before we go, I was cruising in fifth gear. Let's take note of 50 miles an hour at about 2,000 RPM. That's your final drive on this transmission. We'll compare it to the Neon in just a minute. Alright, we jumped into the SRT-4 here. These cars have very similar miles. That has PT Cruiser has 131, this has 141, so generally speaking, the motors are about the same amount of wear and tear at this point in their life. Let's head down the road. This car, you can feel immediately, is a lot stiffer. Doesn't seem like much of a difference, but just it feels slightly better. I don't know why. I like the gauges in this a little better. They're more sport oriented. You can see everything, and you have this one actually has different colored LEDs behind the panel, but we're gonna get up to a spot where we can kind of open it up, get in the second gear, and do the exact same test as we did with the PT Cruiser. We're going to take her down the road here, get to a spot where we can get into second gear and do a 40 roll the same way we did with the PT Cruiser, and we'll see the difference in acceleration. Alright, we got her at 40 here. Let's take off and see our speed here. Well, it makes a lot better sounds, but a lot of that is just because of the blow-off valve. In comparison, I don't really think it's that much faster. And this has tunes. It's definitely a little more violent when you first get on it. It broke the tires loose, whereas the other one did not. I will say one thing that is noticeably different is the gas mileage. This car gets significantly worse gas mileage. Is that because of a tune? I'm not 100% sure. But I would say it's at least 5 to 6 miles per gallon. And 50 miles an hour is also 2,000 RPM. It's so close that you can't actually tell on the gauge cluster here. I would say that this sits about 100 RPM higher, which doesn't make much of a difference, but anyhow, this is where we're at on these cars. This one is definitely more of an economy feeling ride. It's a little rougher on the edges because of the stiffness, but if you're into performance driving at all, this suspension is better. Either way, you can get coilovers for these vehicles. I would definitely recommend doing that. And those are the only real differences performance-wise. So I've never seen a video where somebody takes a PT Cruiser GT 5-speed and does a direct comparison next to a SRT-4. So there it is. That's the proof is in the pudding. It's hard to even find two of these cars at this point, so the fact I had two of them at the same time, that's why this video exists. And we'll see you in the next one. Hopefully a little bit more exciting video. Peace.